Uh, Chris, please don't forget to give me permission to record. That will be for Spanish recording.
Okay.
Chris, once you have that squared away, we will start with welcoming everyone this evening. We'll just take just a minute or two to make sure we have all systems go here with our translation.
Thank you, Chris.
All right. That sounds like we're good to go. All righty. So again, welcome to everyone. I am Rebecca Draper, the manager of Dottie's Office of Community and Business Engagement, and it's good to see so many of you here tonight. And just appreciative, as always, for your time and continued interest, joining the community advisory group and showing your great care for your neighborhood and your neighbors. So we do have a very full agenda this evening, but we want to take just a minute to touch on the language services that are available here. So if you locate the globe just in the bottom of your screen, almost on the far right-hand side, you'll just click on the globe and select either English or Spanish as you prefer. And I'll also ask Francisco if you could share the same information in Spanish so we can make sure we get everybody where they need to be.
Thanks, Rebecca. Buenas tardes a todos, bienvenidos. Como ustedes saben, estas reuniones organizadas por el Departamento de Desarrollo Económico son bilingües y siempre ofrecemos interpretación al español para poder, y es importante que seleccione uno de los dos idiomas, ya sea inglés o español, cualquiera que sea de su preferencia. Todo lo que tiene que hacer es pulsar el globito de la interpretación en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla y seleccionar el idioma de su preferencia.
Thank you, Francisco. So it's time. We're going to move straight along to Catherine Archuleta, our wonderful facilitator, to go over the agenda for tonight and kick us off.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. And welcome to everybody. We're glad to see you again. We haven't met for a while, but now we have so much to tell you tonight and share with you and get your feedback on. So as you can see by the slide that we're going to talk about the final design update of Washington Street. That's pretty exciting, as well as the 48th Avenue outfall. We've received some questions on that. So we're going to do an update on that. And then we have a working group that is being conducted right now. We want to update you on what the interdepartmental working group is talking about. I know several of you are in that working group and we wanted to share it with the rest of the community. And then if there are any other updates from the community, we sure would like to share them if you have any. So we'll just go on, and I think, Karen, are you going to lead that piece? And Mark?
I am. I'm going to do, and I apologize. Hopefully you guys can hear me all right. I was having some technical difficulties. I'm off site right now. Can somebody give me a thumbs up, Catherine? Excellent. Okay. So I'll be going over a bit of the Washington Street design and introducing Mark Gonzalez, who is our project manager, who's going to talk a little bit about the final design. I'm going to be going over the Washington Street study and some of what has brought us to where we are now. So if we can go to the next slide. A lot of you were actively engaged in the Washington Street study, and that was really building off work from the Globeville neighborhood plan, looking at what Washington Street can be as the community envisions as we move forward, looking at a bright future for Washington Street. We'll dive into some of the funding that is making this, giving us the opportunity to take it from vision to reality. And that vision, again, I don't want to read to you, but big picture is that Washington Street is an area transformed to a mixed use riverfront destination and capitalizing on that connection to the South Platte River, providing opportunity for all modes to go up and down Washington and also connect to the adjacent businesses and resources such as the South Platte River Trail, green space, and some of the other projects that we're talking about now, like 48th Outfall and some of the improvements that'll be made there, and the National Western Center. So
Karen, as you pause, can I just remind everybody that they can ask questions in the chat?
Absolutely.
And we'll be monitoring that, and also we'll make sure to stop after every couple slides to be sure that we have time for questions and answers if you have them. But please use the chat. Also, if you like to speak during the presentation, just raise your hand using your icon at the bottom of your screen.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Great
Thank
points.
you.
And then the images that I'll be going over by and large are things that many of you have seen before from the Washington Street study. All of that can be found online. You can take a deeper dive, look at the information there. I'm just doing a quick overview, and then Mark will be presenting some information about the schedule as we move forward. So and then the study, just so folks know, that big picture slide, it really went from the river to all the way to 52nd. The funded portion is really just from 47th to 52nd. So we'll dive into that a little bit more, but big picture, the study looks at a much larger area than what's funded for full design and construction. And we can go ahead now, thanks. So some of the big goals that we worked on collectively with the community was to ensure that we have a transparent process and really to communicate the trade-offs and understand the priorities and how we can maximize the benefit while minimizing the impacts to the community as a whole. So one of the things that we talked about there is how we can make sure we're focusing on multimodal connectivity, not just looking at the vehicle, not just looking at the cars, looking at bikes and peds, transit access, and looking at those cross streets and how they connect into the other resources we have, as I mentioned, the trail links, National Western, South Platte River Trail being a key regional connector, and how we're helping guide people to those key connections and looking at the opportunities to, thank you so much, Chris. Chris has just put a URL for the website that has the Washington Street study. Awesome, Chris. It's a great resource. I admit that I follow that link at least once a week, I think. So it's really a great resource, and looking for opportunities to really celebrate the character of Washington Street. So those are some of the big additional goals, and we will go into the next slide, diving into the outreach that we did. As I said, many of you were involved in that. We had both a community working group that helped us prepare for our public meetings, and we really dove in deep to some of the issues and concerns there. And 3 public meetings, many of them were at Garden Place Elementary, so we were able to catch people when they were picking their kids up from school. We were really wanted to make sure we were reviewing all the background information, getting background information from the community that maybe we didn't have, confirming the goals and community vision, and then reviewing, refining, and finalizing the alternatives. I'm going to do a brief overview of the vision and alternatives coming up next, but that was all with the community and folks that are aware. The woman in blue at the picture to the left there on the screen was Betty Cran. So for those, it gives my heart pause to see her picture, and so happy that she was able to be involved in this process. If we can go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, the Washington Street study looked at the corridor from the river all the way up to the Adams County border at 52nd. And in looking at the corridor in that way, we really determined with the community that there were 3 different character areas. There's one from the Platte to 45th, which is obviously the neighborhood Main Street. And then from 45th to 47th, which really is the underpass and has the access points to I-70. So a lot going on there. And then 47th to 52nd. And those are the 3. And as I mentioned, it's character area 3, 47th to 52nd, that we have funding for that full design and construction.
There's some questions in the chat. Maybe we could stop now, Karen. We have
Absolutely.
some questions from Adrian about the first 3 slides. He asks about the residents that, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to an earlier question that he had, is whether traffic from Washington is traffic from Washington going up 51st to Broadway.
So the question is whether traffic from Washington could go along. I guess
Adrian,
I'm not sure.
Adrian, you want to clarify your question?
Yes. Is the traffic, you're proposing that this is going to be a new expansion on Washington. So I guess my understanding is then that the traffic is also just going to be traveling up 51st to Broadway. Is that correct?
So let me dive into the cross sections. We're not actually expanding Washington. We are simply creating curb and gutter and sidewalk. We're improving Washington for all nodes, but we're not introducing additional travel lanes. And folks can certainly today, without any improvements, travel on 51st from Washington to Broadway.
I know,
They will be able to
there.
do that, right? They'll be able to do that in the future, but we're not expanding, we're not creating additional lanes on Washington. So we're not.
I mean, what I'm getting around to, because I'm really upset right now about the volume of traffic that goes up and down 51st and the semis that get lost because they can't find I-25 coming from Washington, and then they go through Globeville. I mean, huge trucks, semis going through Globeville. I mean, it's outrageous what's going on. And I've been on about this for years. And here we are, that you're going to propose that you're going to be doing this as a new part of, say, expansion, but a new development for Washington, that you're going to allow trucks to continue up and down 51st. I had one stuck outside my house the other day. It just broke down, and we had to go, it's a 2-lane street. So no, I'm not happy about this. And I've been, over the years, I've been trying to find if we can get speed bumps put in there, because I mean, literally there are 2 intersections with stop signs and people do not stop at all. And there's a school right there, as you probably know.
Right.
People fly through the stop signs, trucks fly through the stop signs. This is just going to get worse. I mean, they've had accidents there, but nobody's been killed yet. But this has been going on for years. So I'm just wondering if you can have, I've been asking for limited access. I proposed that to Candy at one point. But if you can cut them off at the railroad tracks and say, this is residential area. If you live here, go through. If you don't, you can't. I mean, this is what I would like to see, because in the daytime, the noise is horrendous. It is actually horrendous.
Absolutely. I think that's something that we can look into, the truck routing and issues on 51st in conjunction with the Washington Street project. And that's something that I know the councilwoman has had concern about, and we've been looking at different means of addressing some of the cut through truck traffic, not folks that are delivering in the neighborhood, but folks that are using this as a
They use it
way
as a
to
shortcut,
I-25.
yeah.
No, so that's something that might be that we can look at in conjunction with the Washington Street study. And sorry, I'm moving. I'm in a rolling chair in an office, and it's.
But let
not
me just
trying to
say
run
this.
away
Well,
from you.
I'm not going to labor this point, but let me just say this.
Mhm.
To the Globeville, I think has been, been forgotten about. But the noise, the pollution, the noise pollution for us up in this area is really, really bad. And we have, I mean, if you drive across I-70 from Denver to Golden, it's got fences, 10-foot high fences all the way along. If you go I-25 north of Denver, there's nothing. There is no bolster to stop any noise at all. So, we are continually bombarded with noise, pollution noise, as well as the other pollution that we have to deal with. And really what it comes down to, nobody pays any attention to what goes on here. So I'm just speaking out at this moment for the residents, because really we do not get any say in what the development, or what kind of development goes on here. And I'm hopefully you'll take it into consideration, at least, if you say, well, the traffic can stop at the railroad tracks down there on Grant. But at the same time, we have semis parked up along 51st from Washington up to the railroad tracks. I brought that to people's attention because in the wintertime, that gets plowed. And while the semis are parked there, I know apparently, I've been told by the police, it's a city problem, but it becomes a one-way street because the plows can only go down through the middle. Anyway, that's my take.
Thank you, Adrian.
All right, thank you.
I appreciate you raising this issue, and I'm sure Karen does as well.
Absolutely. And as I
And-
said, this is something we've been in conversation with the council office as well. So that's something we'll continue to work on and provide feedback through both the CAG meetings and the Washington Street meetings. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you.
Catherine, are there any other?
No, I think that was it.
questions?
Yeah, that was it.
Okay, let's pop forward, and Adrian, this, as we move forward, you'll see a little bit. We dove into the conversation of what would the right cross sections be for Washington? What helps the community and ideally addresses some of the concerns that Adrian mentioned. And one was prioritizing multimodal connections across the corridor, north to south, and then looking at safe routes and facilities for all modes of transit, creating cross sections that limit the impact to the existing properties and meet current standards, and then respects current uses. So what we're talking about there is if there's a property that doesn't need parking, that maybe we reduce the cross section. We don't have parking on both sides of Washington in that cross section so that we can reduce the impact to the adjacent property owners. So those are some of the kind of high level elements. And then of course, meet the goals of the vision of the neighborhood plan where this came from in the first place. So with that, I want to jump into those cross sections, and we're gonna the first is as that character area 1 from the South Platte to 45th Main Street. Noted that there's heavy vehicular traffic to I-25, limited sight lines. So it means that, the road curves, you go under the rail underpass, you've got narrow pedestrian walkways. It's a challenging area for lots of folks. So we came up with a cross section in the next slide where we looked at what we could do to get sidewalk on both sides of the street. And that sidewalk would be a multimodal sidewalk. What's shown also includes an amenity zone, so a buffer between the travel lanes and the sidewalk. So that's just big picture of the vision there. There are some details if you go to that link that Chris shared in the chat of what could potentially happen in that rail underpass to facilitate that. So that's big picture. And then in character area 2, unless we have any questions, Catherine, again, this is not yet funded. Character area 2, similarly, we looked at the underpass. Obviously, that's where the interchange with I-70 is. There's no parking. It's pretty tight. There's limited opportunities for placemaking and creating character. But as we looked at the cross section there, we saw that, and Chris, if we could go to the next slide, we said, well, gosh, there's a whole lot of sidewalk on one side. Maybe we can do something really interesting. And if you look at the report, we looked at some opportunities for art and some historic interpretation there, and looking at different opportunities that are in the area. Again, it's not funded yet, but we looked at some interesting things that could happen there and continue to be open to ideas and vision there as we move forward. So then the big reveal, again, this is just from the studies, so everyone, many of you at least have seen this before. In Character Area 3, we know we've got a narrow right of way. Some of the buildings are right up to the edge of that right of way. And there are areas with curb and there's areas with no curb and sidewalk. So really a great opportunity just to make that a vast improvement to the pedestrian environment simply by having a sidewalk period. But we don't want to simply have a sidewalk period. If we go to the cross sections, we show that we've got a that same multimodal path with a amenity zone creating a buffer. And this cross section shows parking on both sides. As I noted, we're not really changing the cross section. There'll be a center turn lane, travel lane in each direction, and parking. Where we have an opportunity and don't need parking on one side, say because there is a site with a lot of on-site parking, we can reduce the cross section of the street and reduce the impact to the adjacent properties. So that's again based on feedback from the community. And I saw a question pop up in the chat about turn lanes. We'll be looking at each of the signalized intersections to determine whether turn lanes are needed, and where there's a turn lane that we'll look at how best to create safe crossings for pedestrians and all nodes. So that's big picture. This is still just high level review of what we had in the study. Catherine, are there any other questions that we
No,
should
that was the one.
address? Okay.
That you answered Josh's question. Josh, did you have any follow-up to that? Sounds like not.
Sorry, no. That's all I was asking. The 47th in Washington. Sometimes the turn lanes all the way to Argo Park and all the way around there. It just gets really, really crowded, and it's tough for residents to get in and out.
Yeah. I'm the community designer for that area, so I've seen, and Jessica, I know, is on the line from Councilwoman Sitabaka's office. We've seen questions about 47th, and it looks like Vern Hill has a question as well.
Yep. We're off to you, Vernon.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I guess the question that I have, and obviously I've been involved with this for a few years now. This design that we're going over today, this is similar to the design that was done at least 3 years ago, if not better. And
This is actually, I am only reviewing the design from 2018. We haven't gotten to new design.
I'm going to get to my, I'm going to
Okay.
get to my point here. All right, and you know, with everything that's been changing, right now, the area on Washington Street, all the way from up north in Thornton, all the way down through, is basically called the Washington Street Corridor. Okay, and when we have traffic issues or anything on I-25 running north and south, okay, it's also used as an alternative. Notwithstanding the fact that now that it is used for this type of thing, I'm a little concerned in reference to this past design, because obviously we're getting more traffic flow through than we've had, and it's increased over the last at least 3-4 years. And as we move forward with this, and we have the National Western, which is going to have 51st Avenue as their actual main entrance. They're going to be bringing traffic into the Globeville area, down Washington Street, over to 51st and onto the new bridge that's being put in. So I see an increase in traffic flow as it pertains to that. Moving forward, when we get on the south side of I-25, on Brighton Boulevard there's a lot of new development that has taken place there, which brings traffic going onto I-70, going both ways, and also coming through. We have an increase of traffic on that as well. So I'm not sure that a lot of this is being taken into account as we move forward with this design. And then as we go further down the road, which, you know, we were anticipating by now to be actually breaking ground on a lot of this stuff down here. And it'll be another 2 or 3 years before this is going, and all this is going to grow even more. And so by the time you get around to breaking ground or sticking a shovel in the ground over here, this whole design is going to be obsolete. And what's going to happen is everybody's going to be gone, and Globeville area is going to be left to deal with the consequences of a design that's obsolete before you even begin to build it. So how can that be taken into account before we reach this point? And, you know, because it just keeps getting pushed further and further back. And I just believe that this is not going to really work from what I'm seeing. You don't want to expand beyond the 60-foot right of way, but we need to do something with this to make it work the way it really needs to work. And what is it going to take for us to look at it from the standpoint of how it's going to work 10, 15 years from now?
So thank you so much for sharing that, Vernon. I appreciate it. I know that's something that you expressed as a concern throughout the study process as well. And again, I'm just reviewing the outcome of the study. We are going to be moving forward collaboratively with the community on the design, and we'll be cross-checking details and cross-checking as we move forward the appropriateness of the design and the facilities. As I said, we do have a vision that includes that multimodal, and we are expanding outside of the existing right-of-way to provide those multimodal improvements. And certainly in areas there will be right-of-way impacts, so that we are expanding beyond the existing footprint. But I do hope that everyone will stay on board, and as we move into the design process for Washington Street, continue providing great comments and thoughtful and considerate concerns, as Vernon has mentioned.
I'm here also, Nancy Grandis Jones. Okay.
Hi, Nancy.
So, hi. So what you have here on character area 3, it's a 60-foot right of way. Is that what we presently have?
The right of, sorry, go ahead, Nancy.
No, the width of the street is already 60 feet.
The width of the street,
Current width.
Mark, I'll have you go to that
Yeah.
detail.
Yeah, the current width of the street is, it varies slightly, but roughly 30 feet is what you can safely assume. It's roughly 30 feet.
So traffic is moving on 30 feet of roadway.
Correct.
And the right of way, it does vary. If I recall correctly, Mark, there are areas where it is as narrow as, say, at the railroad crossing. It's the right of way is significantly narrowed. I want to say that the whole right of way may be more like 30 feet at the rail crossing.
If the whole
40.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. The whole
30 and change. And there are other areas where it is closer to in terms of the right of way, as opposed to where vehicles are traveling. It does vary. And Mark and his team are getting survey work. We're doing historic interpretation and historic research, doing a lot of background work right now to get all of the information needed that will help move the design forward. And then we'll get to this in a minute, but Mark will share some of the details about the upcoming public process and timeline.
Okay, so that's good information. So you can take property on either side of the street up to that right of way. So Washington Street in the character area 3 will be expanded. It will be wider than what it is right now.
It will be wider in areas, and a lot of that will be to allow for the multimodal path and the amenity zone to create curb and gutter drainage in areas where you don't have that, to formalize parking. We are looking, as I mentioned, from the vision from the Washington Street study, as continuing to have one lane in each direction, but making operational improvements so that vehicles are moving through there more efficiently, and creating set turn pockets, etc. So please bear with, we're not diving into that level of detail today. This is simply trying to give a high level overview for anyone that wasn't engaged in that, as to what the study included and then what will be happening as we move forward.
Okay,
I'm going to move on to AE. You had her hand up, or did you still have a follow-up question?
I think that we should have the right here. Those of us especially have been engaged for years in this. So when do you think the design is going to be formalized? Like, how long will that be?
Wait, so that's part of the presentation that we'll get to after a couple slides from now. Mark will be going over the timeline. So if you can wait just a couple minutes for that, we'll get to that. And then if you have any questions, once we have that up in front of you, Mark and I can answer that.
Great. And will that include the timeline for the other 2 character areas also?
It won't, because we don't have one. I can tell you that we don't have any. The only funding we have right now is for 47th to 52nd. So we are focused on that. And the other areas, character area 1 and character area 2, we do have a vision for, but we do not have a timeline for when we would get funding or be able to move those forward.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. AE?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, this can be inserted into the timeline discussion. Building on the really excellent megaphone that Anthony Yelenick, who I think is logged on, I'm happy to say, issued in that very excellent email reflecting much of the conversation going on in the neighborhood constituency regarding East 47th and East 45th. Can you address the possibility that the east-west access to Washington with the south and north turns, possible turn lanes could be accelerated as a mitigation instead of waiting for a full infrastructure redevelopment, et cetera, because this has been, and you can see it reflected in the neighborhood plan too if you do a word search, 47th Avenue. This has been an ongoing concern. And is there a possibility, even if it's a temporary measure that has to be redesigned, and in fact, I would request it and hope others would echo it, that the logistics be put in place, find a way to do it so that the interior of the neighborhood can be relieved of that problem. So maybe you could address it in the timeline, and that's East 45th Avenue, which is outside of this funding area, as you know, that part of it. But I think that it really merits. And then lastly, the reason I think there's a basis for this is there was a very sincere discussion during the global neighborhood planning process about having 2 timelines. That part of the neighborhood planning process was to let's bring forth those things which can be dealt with immediately, A few things were done, and I think this qualifies in the spirit of that too, both those intersections. So maybe you could weave that into the conversation.
Actually, yeah, let me address that right now. I believe there is an active, so for things like that, that's a great opportunity to put a Pocket Gov or a 311 in. And I believe we do have an active 311 case on turn lanes on 47th. So I'll double check that, but I think that is already an active request that's in our system, and our area engineers are looking at whether there are any interventions that could occur in the short term. So if there's something that folks want to have prioritized now, the best way to do that is, kind of, as you said, AE, an immediate intervention. The best way to get that on our radar and assessed as to whether there's something that we can do more immediately is to either
Karen,
call 311 or
I apologize for interrupting, because I hear you and I know we're short of time, but on behalf of there's no best way. 311 and Pocket Gov, I think, are things that we have approached over the years. This is an opportunity for it to be a force multiplier, to take, let's create some leverage in the conversation from all directions, because I think that's part of what the frustration is. And, to section out these CAG things and 311, let's just say it's a vote in support of, and see if there's any way we can help accelerate the conversation. I'll leave it at that, but I think you understand what I'm saying. There's been a lot of those.
I think we can also take this back from OCBE. And Karen, why don't we, in interest of moving this along, let's put this as an agenda item that we want to talk about with OCBE, and see if we can be of support to within Dottie to move this issue along.
Yeah, and I'll just add in here, Chris will, if we have time, Chris is going to be giving an update on that interdepartment working group, and this might be something that we could follow up on through that group as well.
Okay. All right, should we move to the next slide then?
Yeah, so at this point, I'm happy to introduce myself to the community. I'm Mark Gonzalez, so I'm going to be the project manager for Washington 47th 252nd. And one of the things that we were able to do with this project is, as you may know, this was Elevate bond funded, so this was voted on and approved as one of the bond projects, and we have roughly $23 million coming from that for this project. Part of our process was we recognized, in order to give the full that full cross section that we want to be able to give, we recognized it was going to take more funding than what we had available, and we were able to go out and raise and win the federal raise grant to help us really push this project along. So we got $14 million from that raise grant, which really was phenomenal. And then working alongside that, we have two other kind of funding sources. As it is a priority from the city, this is our capital improvements projects contributing another $3 million. And then we of course have the one of the other things that we were able to do is work with Adams County, and through the tax increment financing, we're able to pull in another $6.7 million in funding through the Denver Urban Renewal Authority. So all in, we have a little over, almost 40, what was that, $46 million coming into this as pushing this project forward. It's really amazing. It's hopeful that's going to help us get all the way through design and construction, and alleviate any of the further burden we would have to really capture the full vision that we have for this area. If you want to jump to the next slide. So when we talk about kind of what our project timeline looks like for Washington, really we're looking at, we are restarting the design process. It is picked up. It is ongoing. I'm currently making concept changes. It feels like every day, as we're re-evaluating, as we're looking at traffic data, as we're looking at where signals might make sense, and how do we streamline data? How do we keep people safe? I'm making it feel like changes every day as we're in the early stages of it. And alongside that is kind of our NEPA process, and that NEPA process, it basically is How do we look at historical context? How do we look at environmental context? How do we look at air pollution, noise pollution, and how does that play into the project in the area? And how does that change our design? And so those two processes really work in hand pretty significantly in the beginning. And so we're working towards kind of a big push for towards the end of January, kind of having a really I don't want to say a final, but like a firm idea. Like this is roughly what we're looking at, targeting in January. And that's the same time frame that we'll probably start some of that right away conversations, and what kind of that coordination looks like. And of course, throughout this whole process, we're going to want to be making sure we're reaching out to everyone. And the next slide will kind of talk through some of our outreach plans, and pop-ups and things of that nature. But you kind of see yep.
Go ahead, finish your sentence and then I'll ask a question.
Oh, I was gonna say, you can kind of look at some of this slide to really get an idea of kind of what we're looking at as far as design timeline. And the only piece I was gonna say was really that construction timeline, is that we'll be looking at starting sometime in 2025, starting to kind of kick off our construction efforts. But go for it, yeah, and happy to take questions on it.
Angela Garcia has a question about the timeline for 45th. When would money be coming in for it? And South Globeville continues to express concern about sidewalks and improvements.
So let me jump in on that. We
Okay.
don't have funding for Washington Street from the river to 47th. That's something that we are always actively looking for additional funding to realize character areas 1 and 2. But 45th itself, as many of you know, has just gone through repaving, and we are going to be finishing that project in the coming weeks. I think about 4 to 6 weeks out, finishing the striping. And we also do have a number of sidewalk projects, including the sidewalk improvements to the 44th bridge connecting over to the 41st and Inca station. So there's a lot going on still in the sidewalk program that will be making a lot of improvements in the area. And that's something that we could, Rebecca and Catherine, get on one of our next meetings, an update on the sidewalk program from the bond. Get some updates.
That's a great
there,
idea.
I know. So there is a lot going on 45th with the repaving and restriping. But then there are a lot of other projects on the sidewalk end, especially that connection to the 44th bridge, so that you can cross from 44th up and over instead of having to go around to 45th.
So
as a
Beth
pedestrian.
and Rebecca, maybe we can put sidewalks on for next month's meeting. Just an update. I know
Yeah.
we haven't had one in a while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely have that noted down. Sounds good.
Take it away, Mark.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, so this is roughly the timeline we're looking at for the city, as we're working with, kind of having a federal grant. This is a pretty quick timeline, especially for design for us. And so I think if you want to look at the next slide, as we start looking at what engagement looks like, we want to make sure that we're very plugged in with you all and with the community, everybody else in the community. And so this is roughly our plan for how we see the next few months moving. We're currently targeting October 20th, and I don't think it's officially final, but that is roughly what we're targeting for kind of like an official public meeting at Project Angel Heart on the 1st. Like I said, we're still finalizing it, but that's the date we are looking at. No matter what, we will have a public meeting next month, and we hope to start laying out some concepts at that time. And really trying to get hands-on with everybody and feedback on what you like and don't like, and especially when we start talking about where does parking make sense, where does it not make sense, where do some of these tree lawns make sense and not, and really trying to engage with you all on what feedback from you looks like in this area. I think at this point we won't necessarily know all of our traffic data as far as like traffic calming devices and exactly what some of these pieces could look like as far as that goes, but we'll definitely need and require a lot of input here on priorities and what makes sense. And then of course, touching base here at a couple more CAG meetings before another public meeting there at the either end of January or beginning of February to kind of bring you near final picture to get additional feedback so we can incorporate any final changes before we kind of push on through the 30% kind of design phase and start moving towards looking at what right of way and things of that nature might look like. And so that's what we're planning here for the next 6 months or so as we start looking at public engagement. And happy to field any questions or concerns with this, but we are planning an October meeting at Project Angel Heart, and I believe we're tentatively scheduled for the 20th, but it's not
We're
official.
hoping, we need the final confirmation both
Yeah.
from the site, and this is also an opportunity for folks here to say, hey, October 20th is terrible because there's a big community event, you know, at the school, and you should move your meeting to the school. So we are also relying on you to tell us if there's something going on that date that we don't know about, that we need to know about. So I don't know when. Back to school nights, I know a lot of back to school nights have already happened. So thinking that wouldn't be a conflict, but if anyone does see anything, please do let us know. It's not locked in. We just I've been scrambling this week, and I see somebody had a question of whether they can get materials in advance. I'm not sure we'll have materials ready in advance. If we do have some things ready in advance, we certainly can get that to you, and we certainly would be able to get materials after and do follow-ups if there's anything that, you know,
And the
folks
public
can't
meeting
get
is
done.
more of a hands-on meeting as well, isn't it, Karen?
Exactly.
It really is.
Exactly.
It's sort of that an
It-
opportunity to get feedback and move pieces around on the puzzle.
Yes, and we're even looking, again, nothing's set in stone yet, but we're even looking at having some time in the afternoon for property owners directly on Washington to stop by and talk about their particular property and any concerns or opportunities there, and then have that larger scale open house. So we're playing around with it a bit, but yeah, that's the vision.
I have a question. In reference to this public meeting in October, will there be some other options presented, okay, to the community in reference to how to handle this? Because, I mean, you're gonna enlighten us of your plans of what you want to and how you want to design this, and then we give input. But I guess what I'd like to really see in this, because I hear, you know, as we're talking through this, these are things that we've discussed over the years. And now we're going back through the same thing again in reference to the percentage of planning, which I anticipated us being way further along than we are. But anyway, having said that, okay, will there be some other options presented to address the issues of the capacity of traffic that's going through this area and how it's going to be accommodated? Because 27 being the completion date of all this, we're going to have to live with this all the way through. And how this is going to be handled, I think is going to be very important. So what options will you be able to present in this October meeting?
In terms
I
of,
think
are you, oh, go ahead, Mark, sorry.
Oh, I'll say no. I mean, it's a great question, Vern. You know, I think as far as like, we will probably only be able to present one full kind of concept design as far as what the city's vision would be based off this study. To your questions of how do we control traffic? How do we especially slow down traffic? Those are things that we'll be able to engage with and discuss, and at least talk through options on what things would look like. As far as conversations about additional lanes, that'll come back to what some of our traffic data study says, and I'm not sure how feasible that is at this moment myself. But looking at that data, those are things we'll be able to talk through, but we'll likely only be able to present one kind of concept, and then be able to make notes and spur conversation from there. But we will be able to talk through things like traffic calming devices. You know, do bulb outs here? Do we narrow the road here? You know, how do we if we add parking in this area, does that alleviate, some of that snow plow concern of where trucks are? Because if there's established parking, semi trucks won't be parking, they shouldn't be parking there. So that some of these things should help a lot of those. And we'll at least be able to talk through it through a concept of this is what we want to do. And that should help inform a lot of our conversation about different measures we can take.
Okay. In reference to, you did hit on a point here, and we've been asking about this for years now. All right. So I'm assuming once you start this design again, we are going to do an actual traffic study of this area, because I believe this really needs to be done, because I don't think anybody really knows how much traffic is going through here.
We have done a traffic study in the area, and I'll have to look at when that was last done. I also know that NUCO as well has done a traffic study in the area. And so these are things that these are all data points that we've looked at, but I'd have to go back and pull up old data to see what was done. But as far as what next steps are, there will be some counts done. And as far as a full traffic study, I believe we're utilizing old data, but we have current counts is kind of the way that works. That basically helps inform our design of how things have changed.
Okay.
And once again, these are things that we can happily talk about. I'll have information that we can talk through a lot of that at the public meeting for sure.
Should we move on to our next? I think we have one more presentation we want to talk about, the outfall.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time and great questions.
I hope you all can come to the public meeting. All right, Lauren.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Lauren. I am the project manager with the city for the 48th Avenue Outfall project. And I'm sure most of you are probably pretty familiar with the project at this point. We presented at the community meeting that was held in Argo Park last month. And I tonight am just going to run through the boards. These are the boards that we had at the meeting, just in case you weren't able to be there. And in case you have any questions, anything came up between then and now that you want to ask about. So this first board is the conceptual plan for Argo Park. This project is a storm sewer driven project. So in 48th, we will have new big storm culverts underneath the road, and you kind of can see that shaded underneath the road there. It'll cross Argo Park between Logan and Pennsylvania. And then this portion of the project in Argo Park is a future phase of construction. We'll be working from the South Platte River west towards Lincoln. So this portion is several years out and yet to be funded for construction. And so at this point, it's all just very conceptual. And so we do really want to hear what you guys think. If you have ideas or needs, connectivity has been a major thing that the public has brought up. So on this, we show a connection from Argo Park to Platte Farm open space, as well as a connection from Argo Park across the railroad tracks. So our plan is to eventually have a trail that extends all the way through there and connects across Washington to the new Greenway. Also on here, let's see, what else do we have? We have a new concrete trail across Argo Park between Logan and Pennsylvania, right above the storm culvert. And then number 5 is just a little depressed area in the grass. It'll still be sod, but the purpose of this is for a little extra capacity during big storm events. And we were able to hear from the public at the meeting a month ago about the large storm event, large rainfall that happened early August, and how that did impact a lot of homes along Argo Park. So this project aims to alleviate some of that flooding. Catherine, do you want to go to the next slide? Thank you. So this is the section from the South Platte River to Washington Street. This part is funded for construction. And so We're at about 30% design, and we plan to go to final design and construction late 2024 and then through 2025. So we've got the future Betty Cram Drive Bridge, which is a separate project, landing onto 48th. You can see that the alignment of 48th shifts slightly north to be in line with where Elgin Place is existing. And then we'll have a greenway between 48th and the 4800 Washington property with some trails. We'll still have the culvert underneath the ground. This will just be for the greenway won't be a full flowing channel. It'll just be for some little extra capacity. And then next slide. This is more like a vision board, just ideas we have for the greenway. Nothing in this is actually like what it will look like. It's just what our goal is. We're aiming for looks similar to this and just ideas. And then next slide.
And Lauren, we have about 1 minute.
Okay, perfect. And then on this one, we've got 48th. These are what the street profiles will look like. 48th from Lincoln to Logan, and then 48th from Pennsylvania to Pearl. And then the bottom one is is 48th from Washington to the South Platte River. And so you can see we're just adding some green and some trees along the edge for some water quality efforts. Are there any questions?
We have 1 minute. Oh, go ahead.
I have a question. Are you accepting comments also?
Yeah.
One is the 48th replacing 47th as far as the bridge that goes over the river? Will 48th connect to that bridge, or?
The bridge, so there will be a new bridge that goes from Betty Cram Drive on National Western and then lands on 48th. It's not replacing any bridge.
Okay, I just remember in the past we used to talk about it as 47th, not 48th. This is the first time I'm seeing this, so
I'm not aware of previous plans to have a bridge on 47th.
Yeah, Nola, it's Beth. And no, this greenway is literally to create a new 48th Avenue greenway to tie specifically to Betty Cram Bridge and link to the heart of National Western. So the 47th bridge crossing that's there, it stays in place. And in the connectivity study calls for a few improvements to bike and ped, but they're two separate bridges.
I know we only have 2 minutes left. I'm going to ask Chris to update the group on the work that he's been doing with the intergovernmental group.
Sure. Thank you so much, Catherine. And as much as I want to say that it's the work that I've been doing, it's been really shared, I feel like, by Nancy and other residents who have really spoken up and shared out about some kind of overlapping concerns in the Washington kind of corridor area between I-70 and 52nd Street. I have been kind of working with Nancy and a couple of other residents on some kind of concerns about conditions in that area. And given kind of the scope of those concerns and kind of the multiple jurisdictions involved, we've actually gone ahead and through the Office of Community and Business Engagement at the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, we've created an interdepartmental working group to just make sure that we have eyes and ears on all of the types of concerns that are being raised by the community, and so that we can really work together as a kind of a whole city approach to resolving a lot of those concerns. They're complex, and a lot of them can't be solved immediately, but they can be discussed and kind of considered in terms of proactive engagement. So really quickly, you know, we've siloed these down to kind of city properties and blight on city properties, illegal dumping, folks who are experiencing homelessness in the area, and then some public safety concerns that have been raised in the area as well. The working group has been working very quickly to address a lot of the immediate concerns that we can address quickly and efficiently. And we're working now on kind of shifting from the tactical to the strategy in terms of ongoing kind of future looking proactive management strategies. So you can kind of see a list on the right hand side of a lot of the work that's been done immediately. And just for folks who would like to be included on those emails, email updates, I'm sending those out at a pretty regular frequency to the community. The next one is due to go out tomorrow. So feel free to include your email in the chat if you'd like to be included in those email updates. But otherwise, thank you so much for being wonderful partners and for being such advocates for your community, because it's been a real pleasure to work with you over the last month or so.
So Angela, I see your note in the chat and we will follow up with you and get you an answer in terms of that. We'll just keep a note of it because I know we're running late. I just want to, are there any updates? I know, Nola, you put some information in about a meeting that will be held, I think, I'm trying to find the right spot, 5 to 7 on October the 4th. So that's in the chat if you want to check that out. And just to let you know that our next meeting will be on October 27th. And hopefully there will be a public meeting confirmed and you will be noticed on around the issues that we raised on Washington Street. Any other things that need to be raised or anybody would like to?
Yes, I
add?
would.
Okay, Nancy.
This is Nancy again. Chris, thank you very, very much for your weekly updates and the people that you have included. And besides me, there are a whole group of people that are involved in this. Vern and Angela and Anthony, especially. So we're very pleased to know about the interagency group. We would like to have that information put out as to who is on the interagency group. And from my understanding that you meet twice a month.
Yep, that's correct.
On Mondays, pretty much. And so anyway, we would like to be able to have 1 or 2 representatives from Globeville sit in on those meetings so we have direct information and we can communicate with the community as to what has been discussed, and also to be a part of the solution generating, because we certainly do have ideas, we certainly do have our priorities within the community of the things that have already been presented. And so I know that Matthew Wilms was maybe going to raise that at one of the meetings. So what do you say about that, Chris?
Well, so I mean, really the interdepartmental group is internal. It's a really tactical group. So we're not necessarily talking about, you know, ideas for solutions or concerns that are being raised. I think the most appropriate way to channel those is through 311. I know that you've heard that, but also through the way that you've been doing it right now, so that we can get those concerns escalated and address them. We're going to keep that group as tactical as possible for the time being. And, you know, through 311, through those email concerns raised, and then through these CAG meetings really is going to be the primary ways for us to talk about concerns and collaborate on them moving forward.
And
with all due respect on that, you know, we need the communication. When we're presenting something, it's of an urgency, and we've talked about that. And there are some long-term things. And, you know, giving us 1 minute for extremely important things to the community, business and residents, is not appropriate. I mean, we knew Washington Street issues were going to take a long time. And to wait for these meetings, that's not appropriate, because for the actions that we've been putting out through how many emails and keeping track of that, it has been going on for months and months. And so, yes, we need to have that information. Otherwise we put things out, we don't know that something's getting done, or hello, we've been promised that something's going to be getting done, and it doesn't. And so it goes round and round and round. So with all due respect to the community and people spending hours and hours and hours, and our great concern for elevating our environment in Globeville, we need to have some other venue that's just about this and not having to wait for these other meetings.
Rebecca, did you want to raise something?
Not particularly. What I was going to say is Chris's work on this isn't every other week. It definitely is ongoing throughout, probably every day, in terms of ongoing coordination and so forth with the various members of that working group to ensure that, you know, he's keeping track of those issues and things are moving forward as best we can do. So, and I realize that's not what you were suggesting, but that is a daily task that he's taking on. And in addition, and I know this is already happening, for sure, Chris and I are both resources for direct communication about issues in the community. And Chris has been going, he lives not far from the area and has been going there regularly to check up on progress on some of these different issues. So his engagement is quite elevated. I know it's not the same as yours as a community member. I completely understand that. We want to be able to set up the best sort of system that we can for addressing these concerns. So that we're working our way through it, and I definitely do understand what you're asking for, and we can discuss it internally. And it hadn't been brought up by Matt or anyone else to this point within the working group, just so you're aware of that.
Well, Rebecca, thank you. And there's no way that I was implying that Chris is only.
I didn't think so.
Oh, my goodness gracious, no. I mean, that's so, but you know, when we raise a concern, for example, somebody writing about under the viaduct there, they're setting up camp and they're setting fires out every night. And then we do get a response, okay, we'll check into it, well, whatever. That's the response that we get. And okay, that's something, but that's not telling us who, you know, who's going out there. It's getting rid of, when we had the people that are living on those ramps to I-70 and causing a big hazard, okay, living on those elevated ramps. Any of the issues that we bring up are of an urgent nature, and we have also purported that we know that there needs to be a systemic response. We're tired of reporting, and we know that the city agency and the police are tired of all this too. And we've been doing our own work. We've had people cutting down weeds and doing things and taking care of the trash left by homeless people. people trying
Dinner
to
will be in about 5,
improve
10 minutes,
things.
I
So
hope.
please take the
It's
point
ready.
that we know that you have to do things systemically, but when we put out something that's urgent, what kind of feedback can we get back on the ramps? CDOT's going to do something up there on those planters to make sure that people cannot go back and camp in there. But we get something, okay? It's going to be something, but nothing more specific. And we've had to search out, I mean, Chris has been great, Matthew Wilms, Joshua Lapley, our city council people, and we've spent tireless hours and hours and hours, community people. So
Maybe one way of continuing this and making sure that Nancy's voice is being heard is Rebecca.
but not
and-
only my voice.
No, I understand. I'm
Yeah,
just in
please.
this particular interest, the concern about having more opportunity for discussion. Rebecca and Chris maybe going
Yeah.
back and talking about that, and then getting back to Nancy about perhaps some solutions to the concerns that she's raised.
Yeah.
And then I
Absolutely.
thank you. And I want to turn it over to Susan. I know she's had her hand.
Okay, present an opportunity for community people to be a part of the solutions.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank
Hear your voice loud and clear. Thank you.
Yeah, I know.
Susan?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think 311 is good for reporting problems and issues. But Chris, I'd really encourage you to include like one person from the community. They have ideas on solutions, and they may have ideas that the city staff doesn't have, and bring that perspective. So I think it would be really helpful to include them in those meetings where solutions are being developed.
Thank you. All your comments are very well received and we're appreciative of them. Chris and Rebecca, I'm sure will go back and talk about this input and get back to the group of people who have been working on this. So it's valuable feedback. We're taking note of all of the comments in the chat as well. So thanks everybody for your comments tonight. And also for staying a little bit longer. I know that you all had wanted to keep these to an hour.
Catherine, we have one more update. I know we're all
Oh,
short
okay.
on time, but Jim is here and would like to just say a few words about
Okay.
Heron Pond and.
Oh, sorry, Jim.
Uh-oh.
We know some of you may have to pull off and appreciate that you've stayed longer. So if you need to pull off, we'll try to get back with you. And certainly there will be the minutes that will be posted. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, mine will be short and sweet. Heron Pond has really been up and running for about 2 months now. They're hauling a lot of dirt. We've been seeing a lot of trucks. They're keeping it going, and they are pushing to have 51st open by the end of the year. So we should have a through corridor there to keep that street from being closed. So it'll be open to the public by the end of the year. That is our goal. So that's really the bulk of it. Anything else, you can check out the website. You can reach out to me or the hotline if you have any questions. It's going great though. It's a good crew out there.
Iron Woman, I think, is the name of the
correct
the construction company.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? Again, thank you for staying over later this evening. I think the issues you raised are very important and required the amount of time that we spent. So I know it's a little bit longer and appreciate your willingness to stay with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. Good to see all of you.